Hi everybody, my name is Jacalyn and I will be reviewing Chapter 5, which is the Anthropological Approaches to Personality Studies. So first I just wanted to give an overview of what happens in the beginning of this chapter. A Japanese psychiatrist is interested in the way that Americans are and how their culture is. And he goes to a house and is asked if he is hungry, when he lies and he says no. The only reason he lies is because he thinks it's polite and it's what he's grown up to do. He's actually starving. At this point, he realizes how different the two cultures are, his culture being the Japanese culture, and then the other culture compared to it is the American culture. He knows that in his culture, the hungry person wouldn't just be offered food, but they would actually be given the food. In American culture, they ask and they don't make the hungry person eat. So the book starts to develop and get into definitions. And first, it's what is anthropology? And anthropology is actually the study of man or humans. And there are two subfields in it. So ethnology, which is the comparative study of various cultures, and ethnography, which is the intensive descriptive study of a single culture. And both those definitions and the subfields are actually used a lot within this chapter. So getting right into it, the first anthropologist is Robert Levine, and he has three basic questions for the world of anthropology. The first one is, are there psychological differences between human populations? What are the causes in individual development of psychological differences between populations? And lastly, the third one is, how are psychological differences between populations related to the sociocultural environments of those populations? The next subculture is culture and personality studies. So Robert Levine has 5 categories of studies, and the first one is anti-cultural personality position. This is seen as irrelevant. Second is reduction position. This is irrelevant because of its inclination to Freud's theory of psychosexual development. Third is the personality is cultural review. Drastically modified, it's making less deterministic and opting for more interactive and empirical approaches. Fourth is the personality meditation view, and the most recent studies use 4 approach. And then lastly, the fifth one is the 2 systems view, and most recent studies use 5 approach. Next are the 3 main approaches to culture and personality. The first one is culture as a determinant in personality. The second is culture as the determinant in the expression of personality. And the third is culture and personality as coexisting systems in society. So those kind of also go into Robert Levine's studies and the approaches he likes to use. Next, we have Ruth Benedict's pattern of culture. Getting right into this, it was studied the cultural patterns of the Zuni and the Dubu in the Kwaku. She was interested in understanding the group differences in personality characteristics. So basically, she took these 3 groups and she studied how they are and their personality, how it led to the culture. Zuni personality was molded by the Apollonian culture. Dubu and Quetzal personality was formed by Dionysian. Next, we have Mead's South Sea Studies. So Mead's, also Margaret Mead, studied behavior patterns of 50 adolescent girls in Samoa. So the studies actually found that they tended to be more focused on specific research topics, which is something that Mead liked to do. The findings came back as these girls didn't experience conflict, tension, and rebellion as most Americans actually did. But the study did take 9 months, so it was a long 9 months of studying these girls and thinking about how their culture was compared to the American culture as well. Also, life events that were considered stressful were marriage, birth, sickness, and death. That was to the American culture. These were just considered normal to these people and of this other culture. Next is Abraham Gardner. He found the dynamic model of culture and personality. He defined the concept basic personality structure. And to him, it was defined as the effective adaptive tools of the individual, which are common to every individual in the society. Gardner did not collect data that provided the cross-cultural difference in child rearing practices. Moving right along from those two researchers is the main cultural determinist approach concerns. So the two main concerns are how cultural ethos or patterns become part of the individual's personality, and second, how does the individual's personality affect cultural configuration of the group? Next is Whiting's child training and personality. So basically, Whiting found that the middle-class American families start child training practices early on, and that could be known as potty training, going to school, manners, anything like that. Parents focus on interpersonal relationships more than body functions. These are related with explanations of illness and therapy as well. The next comparative studies are comparative studies of values in complex societies. So, excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, but the Kluckholm and Schrodbeck's values orientation study. It's the cognitive, affective, and direct elements of the three elements to the evaluation process. It was told that these elements give order and direction to the human act and thoughts, so it kind of explains everything there. The 5 problems in all human groups are seen as 1. Character of innate human nature. 2. The relation of man to nature. 3. Temporal focus of human life. 4. Modality of human activity. And lastly, the 5th one is modality of man's relationship to other men. So, just to review, those are the 5 problems in all human groups that are seen from the Kluckholm and Schrodbeck's value orientation study. Next, we have Hsu's Americans and Chinese Passage to Differences. So this is a few little notes on this. Americans come from an individual-centered way of life, and I'm sure we've all heard this before. Americans kind of seem to care about themselves, especially coming from New York, Los Angeles, places that are busy like that. We hear it all the time with traffic. Chinese come from a situational centered way of life, so they're more focused on the actual situations and what's happening in their life. When compared to each other, the Americans emphasize independence, where Chinese are dependent on each other. And Americans like to do things by themselves, whereas Chinese really focus on the family and everything like that. Lastly, Americans are also competitive, while the Chinese are cooperative and work together. Going back, Americans are competitive in everything we do. And lastly, the last topic of Chapter 5 would be the two-system approach of Ingles and Levinson. So this is a study that required primarily the psychological investigation of representative samples of adult individuals in a society rather than analysis of collective products such as rituals. So this really dove into adult individuals in their own society and how they really focused on life. The research was 4 ideals of the relationship between model personality and social structure, the system. And lastly, the 4 ideals are ideal congruence, unstable congruence, institutionality induced non-congruence, and characterological included non-congruence. So that's it for chapter 5, and that's the review.